If you listen closely, you can hear, over on the horizon, the armies of the world are marching to battle. The sounds of war and rumors of war, famine, pestilence, and woe are growing ever louder. Do you have ears to hear and eyes that see? Perhaps you have been too burdened with the troubles and cares of this life to notice. Maybe you have been weighed down by gluttony, drunkenness, and entertainment. If you cannot hear the steady beat of the battle drum, your ears have waxed gross and your heart has become hardened, because the writing on the wall is very clear. We are on the threshing floor, on the verge of the end of an era. The nations of this earth will soon engage in the deadliest war of this chapter in human history, and they will meet their demise. Armageddon is in their scopes. The great battlefield beckons them closer and closer. Are you ready for the war of the great day of Yahuwah the Almighty? Blow a ram's horn in Zion and sound an alarm in my Kodesh, my set-apart mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the earth tremble, for the day of Yahuwah is coming. For it is near, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like the morning clouds spread over the mountains, a people, many and strong, the like of whom has never been, nor shall there ever be again after them, to the years of many generations. Today the term Armageddon is used loosely by politicians, scientists, religious leaders, and entertainers to depict the end of the world. And this can be any end of the world scenario in their opinion. Anything from nuclear, chemical, or biological warfare that could potentially wipe out life on this planet can be deemed, in their view, Armageddon. Popular culture has exploited this term. A simple search on the internet for the term Armageddon will yield thousands upon thousands of results. The very word is found at the forefront of works of fiction and fantasy in modern times. There are books, movies, songs, and games all having the term Armageddon in their name. The secular world loves to use this term, and they often do to illustrate the idea of the extermination of human existence. Interestingly enough, however, the term comes from the book of Chazon, or Revelation, and is only vocalized Armageddon once in the entirety of Scripture. Those who use this term loosely in this day and time have no idea or concept what Armageddon truly is. Revelation chapter 16 verse 12. And the sixth malach, or messenger, poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, in order to prepare the way of the sovereigns, the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits as frogs, for they are spirits of demons, doing signs which go out to the kings, the sovereigns of the entire world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of Yahuwah the Almighty. See, I am coming as a thief. Blessed or Baruch is he who is staying awake and guarding his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And they gathered them together to the place called in Hebrew Har Megiddo. Notice that this is not called the Battle of Armageddon, but is rather called the Great Battle or War of Yahuwah the Almighty. The nations of the earth, the entirety of all the nations, will be gathered at this location, which is Har Megiddo or Armageddon. Armageddon is an attempt to transliterate these 2 Hebrew words. Har means mountain, hill, or can figuratively mean hill country. Megiddo, however, is the spelling found in the Hebrew text of ZekarYahuw or Zechariah chapter 12. The normal spelling is Megiddo. Collectively, Megiddo is mentioned 12 distinct times in the Hebrew scriptures. Megiddo or Megiddon literally means place of crowds. It is the ancient city of Canaan assigned to Manasseh, the tribe of Israel, and located on the southern rim of the plain of Esdraelon, 6 miles from Mount Carmel, where YaHuWaH the prophet called down fire from YaHuwah the Almighty, and 11 miles from Nazareth. Megiddo comes from the root word gadad in Hebrew. It means to penetrate, to cut into, to gash, prune, cut from the loom, attack, invade, to gather troops and crowds. Megiddo is mentioned first in Yahushua or Joshua chapter 12 verse 21 as being one of the 31 kingdoms that Yahushua ben Nun and the children of Israel smote. Megiddo or Megiddon was a royal city of the ancient Canaanites before it was captured by Yahushua ben Nun, commander of the Israelites. Megiddo was a fortified city which was strategically located to guard an international trading route around Mount Carmel, again the place where Eliyahu the prophet called down fire from YaHuwah. After the king of Megiddo was killed by the Israelite commander Yahushua ben Nun, the region was given to the tribe of Manasseh. King Solomon built up Megiddo and fortified it even stronger than it originally was, according to 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 15. Located between the heights of Galilee and Samaria extends a valley shaped like an arrow that points to the Mediterranean north of Mount Carmel. The valley is known in the Hebrew scriptures as Emek Yisrael, not to be confused with Yisrael referring to the 12 tribes of Israel. Rather, Yisrael means sowed by El or Elohim. The phrase Valley of Yisrael was at times used to refer to the central part of the valley, around the city of Yisrael, between Mount Gilboa and the hill of Moreh and Mount Tabor. The head of this arrow-shaped valley, which is in the southern portion, is sometimes referred to as the plain of Megiddo, after the ancient city of Megiddo, which was located there. The city of Megiddo today is actually a tell, meaning that so many cities have been built on top of one another in this location that it forms a man-made hill, making this location an archaeological treasure. Megiddo arises out of the lowland plain. The valley is covered with a very thick blanket of black soil and is extremely fertile. In ancient times, even to this day, this region has been always considered the most fertile land in Israel and arguably the entire Middle East. In modern times, this area is considered Israel's breadbasket, a place for growing wheat, melon, oranges, white beans, cowpeas, chickpeas, green beans, cotton, sunflowers, and corn. The region is also used for grazing tracts, serving multitudes of sheep and cattle. This area has also been known as the plain of Esdraelon, which is the Koine Greek rendering of Yisrael. Yisrael is often used generally to refer to the entire flat and fertile plain, stretching southeast from the coast north of Mount Carmel to the Jordan River at Bethshan. In ancient times, the Yisrael or Esdraelon plain was the only east to west access between the coast and the Jordan Valley. The main north and south trade routes between Mitzrayim or Egypt to the south and Mesopotamia to the north were through this valley. The main route from Egypt, known as the Via Maris, the way of the sea, ran northward along the coastal plains to the spur of mountains running to the sea at Mount Carmel just north of Caesarea. This was an international military and trade route that ran between Egypt, Syria, Phoenicia, Anatolia, and Mesopotamia. And this is the future location for the demise of the international armies as we know them. The hill country of Megiddo is 60 miles north of Jerusalem. More than 200 battles have been fought in that location. The plain of Megiddo and the nearby plain of Esdraelon will be the focal point for the gathering of all the nations at quote-unquote Armageddon, to the great war which will rage within the entire border of Israel as far south as the Edomite city of Batra, which is located in modern Jordan. This battle will end in the Kidron Valley, known as the Valley of Yehoshaphat. But the Valley of Armageddon was famous for two great victories in Israel's history. Barak's victory over the Canaanites, which is mentioned in Judges chapter 4, and Gideon's victory over the Midianites, which is mentioned in Judges chapter 7. Armageddon was also the site for two great tragedies in Israel's history. The first being the death of Shaul, the first king of Israel, and his sons, according to 1 Samuel 31 verse 8. And also the beloved king of Israel, of Yehudah, that walked in the way of Yahuwah like no other king before him, according to the scriptures, which is King YashaYahuw, or Josiah. His death is recorded in 2 Kings 23 and 2 Chronicles 35. Whoever could maintain an army within the city of Megiddo could dominate the entire international route, making this location a great location for war. Whoever controlled the Israel Valley controlled trade and traffic, merchants, warriors, nomads, and kings throughout the civilized world. Nearly every invading force to 2000 CE has fought a battle in the Israel Valley. The region surrounding the ancient site of Megiddo has experienced more war and bloodshed than any known location on earth. Warriors who have fought on the battlefield of Israel include Egyptians, Canaanites, Israelites, Midianites, Amalekites, Philistines, Hasmoneans, Assyrians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Muslims, Crusaders, Mamluks, Mongols, French, Ottomans, British, Australians, Germans, and Arabs. They have all fought and died in this location. Warring generals, to name a few, include Pharaohs Thutmose III and Necho. Also Deborah and Barak, Sisera, Gideon, Shaul and Jonathan, Shishak, Yahuw, Sennacherib, Joram, Ahab's family lived there, and Yoshiyahu. Antiochus Epiphanes, Ptolemy, Vespasian, Saladin, Napoleon, and Allenby during World War I. In fact, Napoleon Bonaparte stated when he came across this plain that there is no place in the world more suited for war than this. He also said all the armies of the world could maneuver for battle here, and the most natural battleground of the entire earth is in this location. Since Cain killed Hebel, or Cain killed Abel, battles and war have been a part of human history. It is fascinating that the oldest written and detailed account of battle comes to us from the ancient Egyptians, and this ancient battle took place in Megiddo, in present-day Israel. In the 15th century BCE, the forces of Pharaoh Thutmose III and the rebellious sovereign of Kadesh, along with his Canaanite allies, warred at Megiddo. All details of this battle come from Egyptian sources, primarily the hieroglyphic writings on the hall of the annals of the temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak, Thebes, which is now Luxor, by the military scribe Tejanini. This battle at Megiddo is also the oldest recorded use of the composite bow and the oldest reference to a body count. Thutmose III stated, "Megiddo is worth 1,000 cities." In 1874, Herbert Kitchener reported to the Palestine Exploration Fund that this is the greatest battlefield in the world, where the last great battle of Armageddon is to be fought. Winston Churchill stated, "Never in the field of human conflict have so many fought so often over so little space." Revelation 16 verse 12 says once more, "And the sixth messenger, or Malach, poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up in order to prepare the way of sovereigns from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits as frogs, for they are spirits of demons doing signs, which go out to the sovereigns of the entire world." This will be an international war, a world war. To gather them to the war, or battle as they say, but is literally a war of that great day of Yahuwah the Almighty. "See, I am coming as a thief. Baruch is he who is staying awake and guarding his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame." And they gathered them together to the place called in Hebrew Har Megiddo. And the 7th messenger poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the dwelling place of the heavens, or Shemayim, from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there came to be noises, and thunders, and lightnings. And from there came to be a great earthquake, such a mighty and great earthquake as had not come to be since men were on the earth. And the great city became divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babel was remembered before Elohim to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. The word of Yahuwah is very clear. Yahuwah will gather all nations and all people. Every sovereign entity will be represented at the war of that great day of Yahuwah the Almighty. And he shall smite the earth, and the kings and the rulers of the earth, he shall beat them into subjection. He shall rule over the entire world. The book of Tehilim, or Psalms chapter 2, tell us very clearly, why do the nations rage and the people meditate vanity or emptiness? The sovereigns of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahuwah and against his Mashiach, his Messiah, and say, "Let us tear apart their bonds and throw away their ropes from us." He who is sitting in the heavens laughs. Yahuwah mocks at them. Then he speaks to them in his wrath, and he troubles them in his rage, saying, "But I have set my sovereign, my king on Zion, my set-apart mountain. I inscribe for a law. Yahuwah has said to me, 'You are my son. Today I have brought you forth,' speaking of the sovereign Messiah. 'Ask of me, and I make the nations your inheritance, and the ends of the earth your possession. Break them with a rod of iron, dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. And now be wise, O sovereigns, be instructed, you rulers of the earth. Serve Yahuwah with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be enraged, and you perish in the way, for soon his wrath is to be kindled. Baruch, or blessed, are all those who take refuge in him.'" Yahuwah has said that he laughs at the nations when they say, "Let us tear apart their bonds from us," and they go to war against Yahuwah and against his sovereign, his Mashiach, who is the Son of Yahuwah. It says it right in the scriptures, "Kiss the Son, lest he be enraged, for his wrath is about to be kindled." Yahuwah has told us that he will destroy the nations and the kings of the earth because they do not serve him, because they do not fear and tremble before his word, and they do not consider his son, Yahushua, who came forth into the earth and was rejected and despised by man, and was made to bear the torture stake, and he died, and he is resurrected and lives forever, and he will come and destroy the nations, for it is written. The scriptures tell us what we should look for the beginning signs of Har Megiddo or Armageddon. We should look for the nations to unify in a one world government, a one world religion, and a one world economy. And we've been hearing about this for decades. But now as we look around, we see that it is a startling reality in this day and age in which we live, when all nations will surrender their sovereignty, that is the United States included, will surrender its sovereignty to the global powers that be, which are ruled by Shaitan, the dragon, the serpent of old, and the fallen messengers with him. Yahuwah Elohim is taking a stand against this one world government, against the vanity of mankind, and against their arrogant ways. He will destroy them for their idol worship. He will destroy them for their whoremongering and their adultery. He will destroy them for all the corruption which they've shown on the earth, and the blood which has been shed on the earth. The blood of the prophets still cries out. The blood of the Messiah Yahuwshuwa still cries out against the wickedness of this world. Yahuwah will rule and reign over all. And the book tells us very clearly, Har Megiddo, Armageddon, will take place when the world has unified. And we see that one of the big signs will be that the river Euphrates will begin to dry up to make a way for the sovereigns from the east. The scriptures are very clear. When we talk about prophecy and we give a direction in the scriptures should be interpreted to understand the direction from the location of Yerushalayim, that is Jerusalem. The sovereign nations which lie to the east of Yerushalayim are Iran, China, Japan, and India. And isn't it interesting that Iran has vowed to destroy Israel off the face of the planet? Other nations that exist to the east of Yerushalayim include Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. And let us not forget Asia Minor, which the Greeks called Anatolia, which meant east or the sun rising, which today is called Turkey. It should also be noted that Israel is surrounded by Islamic nations who have threatened to completely annihilate the sovereign nation of Israel. We know that the Quran, the religious text of Islam, teaches that in the last days that even the trees will cry out, "There is a Jew behind me, come and kill me." They have a religious mandate and they will fulfill it to march to the battlefield. When we look to the east of Israel, we see Jordan, Iraq, Afghanistan. There are many nations that lie to the east. And we know that the river Euphrates today is in fact drying up to make a way for the sovereigns for the east. This is national news because of dams that have been placed in the river Euphrates, along with the great drought which Yahuwah has brought upon the land to smite the river Euphrates. It is now drying up, and it is nothing more than a creek today, and it will be dried up so that the way can be made for these nations. The book of Psalm, or Tehilim, chapter 83, tells us that a band of nations, including Jordan, Lebanon, the Palestinians who reside within the borders of Israel, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, along with Saudi Arabia, will come against Yerushalayim, along with all nations. And the scriptures tell us in the book of Daniel also that these nations will come, and also that tidings from the north will upset the beast system that is the revived Roman Empire, the European Union, and its confederate allied states in the Islamic empires of the world. They will all unite under the pretense to take Jerusalem and to divide the great city of Yahuwah. Yahuwah has warned that this would take place in the latter days. The scriptures tell us that tidings from the north and from the east will trouble the beast system when they invade in Jerusalem. And when you look north of Jerusalem, of Yerushalayim, there can be only one nation that this can be, and that is Russia. So we know that Russia, China, Japan, India, and all nations will be gathered to the great war of Yahuwah. But we know that it does not matter which nations are mentioned, because every nation will be there. The United States will be there. NATO will be there. The United Nations will be there in that day when Yahuwah destroys them and he laughs at them and he mocks them for their vanity. Yahuwah will rule and reign. Revelation chapter 19 verse 11 reads, "And I saw the heavens opened, and there was a white horse, and he who sat on him was called trustworthy and true, and in righteousness he judges and fights. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, having a name that had been written, which no man had understood or perceived except himself. And having been dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Yahuwah." This is the sovereign Messiah, Yahushua, the Messiah, HaMashiach. And the armies in the heaven, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron. And he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of El Shaddai. And on his robe and on his thigh or banner, he has a name written, Sovereign of Sovereigns and Masters of Masters. And I saw one malach or messenger standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great Elohim, to eat the flesh of sovereigns, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of strong ones, and the flesh of horses and those who sit on them, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the sovereigns of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him who sat on the horse and his army. The nations of the earth will go to war against the sovereign Messiah when he is seen in the heavens descending to the Mount of Olives. They will declare war on the Lamb of Yahuwah. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, burning with sulfur, which will take place at Gehennom. And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and out of the birds who filled with their flesh. Yahuwah says that he will feed the flesh of your kings and your leaders, your princes and your warriors to the birds, both small and great, rich and bond. It does not matter. He will destroy them, and he will rule and reign, because they will go to gather themselves against Yahuwah's own messenger, his own prophet, his own son, his own anointed one, who is Yahushua, the everlasting word of Yahuwah, the Torah made flesh, who dwelt among us. The book of Revelation chapter 14 verse 19 tells us, and the messenger thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of Elohim. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came up out of the winepress up to the bridles of the horses for about 300 kilometers. This is talking about when Yahuwah brings the armies of the earth into the valley of Yahushaphat. They will march 60 miles to the south just to attack the city of Yahuwah, Jerusalem, which is Yerushalayim, so that they may devour the riches thereof, and to exile those who dwelled safely within the gates of Jerusalem. And they will ravish the women, and they will take the children, and there many will fall by the sword. The scriptures tell us 2/3 of the Yahudim, the Jews that live in Jerusalem, will be purged from Jerusalem. They will be slaughtered by the nations. And when it looks like Israel has no hope, then we know that the sovereign Messiah will come down at the Mount of Olives. His feet will touch the Mount of Olives. And when you look down the Mount of Olives, there you see the Kidron Valley, which is the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is what the Gentiles call it. It is YaHuWaH. It means Yahuwah is the judge. He is the great judge, and he will bring them there, and there he will annihilate them. And the scriptures tell us that the blood that will be in that valley will be so much that it will come up to the bridle of the horse for about 300 kilometers. The great winepress of the wrath of Yahuwah is about to happen. We must prepare, because the children of the earth, they will send their wives, their brothers, their sisters, their children, their grandchildren to the great war. America will send its children and its grandchildren to the great war. We have to warn the people and blow the shofar and sound the alarm so that they know what is coming. They are so lost in their minds about this pre-tribulational rapture nonsense that the Christian church teaches, that they think they will not see this day. But little do they know that there are preachers in the pulpits of America whose children and grandchildren will go and die on the battlefield of YaHuWaH in that day, because they did not have sound teaching. They did not have the wisdom of YaHuWaH. They were not prepared. They did not have sound doctrine, because they were false prophets, false teachers in these last days. We have to come out of Babylon. That means mixture and confusion. We have to understand the scriptures properly, because this is literally a life or death scenario. You don't get to march to that battlefield and repent. When you go to that battlefield and you die in the Kidron Valley, you will be destroyed in the everlasting flames of Gehinnom. Revelation chapter 17 verse 14. They shall fight with the Lamb, that is Messiah, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is master of masters and sovereign of sovereigns. Those with him are called and chosen and trustworthy. We read in Revelation chapter 16 verse 13 that there will be 3 unclean spirits, which are demons, that will come forth from the mouth of the New World Order, that one world government, and of the false prophet. And they will go forth to the entire earth in order to do lying signs and wonders, so that they may draw the warriors of the earth to the great war of YaHuWaH the Almighty. So we have to understand, this is not just a battle of flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle. Unclean spirits as frogs will come, and they will lead the people astray, doing lying signs and wonders. And we know that the great sign again is the drying up of the river Euphrates. We read about this event in Revelation chapter 9 also, beginning in verse 14, saying to the 6th messenger who heard the trumpet, release the 4 messengers, those having been bound. These are wicked, evil messengers who fell at the rebellion, and they were bound at the great river Euphrates. And the 4 messengers, those having been prepared for the hour and day and month and year, were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. And the number of the armies of the horsemen was 200 million. And I heard the number of them. We see that the unclean spirits, the demons, the fallen messengers will have a direct responsibility in drawing the armies of the world to the great battle. Many might say that it is an alien invasion of some sort, because they are disconnected with the reality that YaHuWaH has created all types of beings that are intelligent, and that they are in the Shamayim, the heavens. He has created Malachim, which we call messengers. People call them angels. That's the wrong terminology and the wrong image prescribed to the Malachim. He has also created cherubim and seraphim, all types of beings. There are beings who are messengers who fell away from YaHuWaH in the great rebellion, and these were cast down into outer darkness and chained for the great day of the judgment. Some of them were chained in the river Euphrates. We see that the idea of the drying up of the river Euphrates will somehow trigger the release of these messengers, who will go forth and gather an army of 200 million people that will slay 1/3 of mankind on the earth. We better be prepared for what the scriptures are saying. In Yoel chapter 2, starting in verse 30, we read, and I shall give signs in the heavens and upon the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun is turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of YaHuWaH. And it shall be that everyone who calls on the name of YaHuWaH shall be delivered. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be an escape, as YaHuWaH has said, and among the survivors whom YaHuWaH calls. We continue reading in Yahuwah or Joel chapter 3 verse 1. For look in those days and at that time, when I turn back the captivity of Yehudah and Jerusalem, then I shall gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Yehoshaphat, and I shall enter into judgment with them there for my people, my inheritance, Yisrael, whom they have scattered amongst the nations, and they have divided up my land. It is important to know that Israel in the last days will stand alone. There will not be another nation that will stand by Israel in this day. The United States of America has driven a great wedge between its ally Israel. And in this day, there will be no such alliance between the United States and Israel. America will set its face against Israel in order to protect the treaties that it has made with the enemies of Israel. In Joel chapter 3 verse 9, proclaim this amongst the nations, prepare for battle, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of battle draw near, let them wake up, beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong, hasten and come, all you Gentiles, you nations, and gather together all around. O YaHuWah, let your mighty men come down here. Let the nations, the Gentiles, be aroused and come up to the valley of Yehoshaphat. For there I shall sit and judge all the nations on every side. Put in the sickle, for the harvest has grown ripe. Come, go down for the wine press. We see that terminology yet again. The wine press is filled. And where is it filled at? At the valley of Yehoshaphat. It says the vats overflow, for their evil is great. Crowds in the valley of decision. For the day of YaHuWah is near in the valley of decision. Sun and moon shall become dark, and stars shall withdraw their brightness. And even today I see crowds and crowds, and they are in the valley of decision. The great day of YaHuWah is coming upon those who are in the valley of decision. And further in verse 16 we read, and YaHuWah shall roar from Zion and give forth his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and earth shall shake. But YaHuWah shall be a refuge for his people and a stronghold for the children of Israel. Then you shall know that I am YaHuWah your Elohim, dwelling in Zion, my Kodesh, my set-apart mountain. And Jerusalem shall be set apart, or Kodesh, and foreigners shall not pass through her again. And it shall be in that day that the mountains drip with new wine, and the hills flow with milk. And all the streams of Yehudah shall be flooded with water, and a fountain flow from the house of YaHuWah, and water the Wadi Shittim. Mizraim shall become a ruin, that is Egypt. And Edom, which is Jordan, shall be a ruin, a wilderness because of violence done to the people of Yehudah, whose innocent blood they shed in their land. But Yehudah shall dwell forever, and Jerusalem to all generations. And I shall avenge their blood, which I have not avenged. YaHuWah shall be dwelling in Zion. What a warning to the nations of the earth who have treated the children of Israel with corruption and wickedness, and slain them in their lands, and dispersed them, and have divided the land of Israel, and divided Jerusalem. YaHuWah says he will require the blood from you that he has not required yet. He will avenge the blood of Yehudah, of Judah, in that day. YashaYahuw, chapter 34, verse 1. Come near, you Gentiles, you Goyim, you nations, to hear, and listen, you people. Let the earth hear, and all that is in it, the world and all its offspring. For the displeasure of YaHuWah is against all Gentiles, all Goyim or nations, and his wrath against all their divisions. He shall put them under the ban, he shall give them over to the slaughter, and their slain be thrown out, and their stench rise from their corpses, and mountains shall be melted with their blood. YaHuWah is very clear. He is gathering all nations and their divisions, and he is going to bring them down to the great war. Not one nation will escape from his hand. They will have a representative of every nation at the great war of YaHuWah, and he will have the last laugh. It says, he who is in the heavens laughs at them and mocks them. ZekarYahuw, or Zechariah, chapter 12, verse 2. See, I am making Jerusalem a cup of reeling or trembling to all the people all around, and also against Yehudah, that is Judah. It is in the siege against Jerusalem. And in that day it shall be that I make Yerushalayim, that is Jerusalem, a very heavy stone for all people. All lifting it are severely injured, and all the nations of the earth shall be gathered against it. Take note, all the nations of the earth shall be gathered against it. In that day, declares Yahuwah, I smite every horse with bewilderment, and its rider with madness. And on the house of Yehudah I open my eyes, but every horse of the people I smite with blindness. And the leaders of Yehudah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Yerushalayim are a strength to me, through Yahuwah Sabaoth, Yahuwah of hosts, their Elohim. In that day I make the leaders of Yehudah, that is Judah, like a fire pot among trees, and like a torch of fire in the sheaves. And they shall consume all the people all around, on the right and on the left. And Yerushalayim shall dwell again in her own place, in Yerushalayim. Yahuwah shall save the tents of Yehudah first, so that the comeliness of the house of David and the comeliness of the inhabitants of Yerushalayim would not become greater than that of Yehudah. In that day Yahuwah shall shield the inhabitants of Yerushalayim, and the feeble among them in that day shall be like David or David, and the house of David or David like Elohim, like the Malach Yahuwah, the messenger of Yahuwah before them. And it shall be in that day that I seek to destroy all the nations. Your scriptures might say Gentiles. That word goyim means nations that come against Yerushalayim. And I shall pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Yerushalayim a spirit of favor and prayers. And they shall look on me whom they pierced. They shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. This is speaking of Yahushua, the only son of Yahuwah. When they pierced Yahushua, the son of Yahuwah, it is as if they pierced Yahuwah the Almighty, even though that is impossible to do. And they shall be in bitterness over him, as a bitterness over a firstborn. In that day the mourning in Yerushalayim, which is Jerusalem, is going to be great, like the mourning at Hadad Rimon in the valley of Megiddo. Take note of the mention of the valley of Megiddo here in the great context of the war of Yahuwah. And the land shall mourn, every clan by itself, the clan of the house of David by itself, and their women by themselves, the clan of the house of Nathan by itself, and their women by themselves, the clan of the house of Levi by itself, and their women by themselves, the clan of Shimei by itself, and their women by themselves. All the rest of the clans, every clan by itself, and their women by themselves. You need to take note to many things in this prophecy. Yahuwah is telling us that Yehudah, the southern kingdom of Judah, shall inhabit the region of Yerushalayim. They shall inhabit the city in that day, when the nations are gathered round about them. The great conflict in that day is that Yahuwah shall make Jerusalem, which is Yerushalayim, a cup of trembling to all the nations, and all that try to pick it up and lift it will be struck by it. Yahuwah Elohim will fight for Jerusalem. He will fight for Yerushalayim. Yehudah has to be in the land. They are in the land at this time. The scene is set. It does not mention the other Israelites, the other tribes of Israel, in the great context. It tells us that Yehudah will be in the land at this time. The Ephraimites, the northern kingdom, will not be restored until after this time, when Mashiach sets up his kingdom at this time. Then the two sticks will be one in his hand. And he will rule over all the tribes of Israel and all those who have joined themselves to the nation of Israel. ZekarYahuw chapter 13 verse 8. And it shall be throughout all the soil, declares Yahuwah, that 2/3 therein are cut off and die, and 1/3 is left therein. And I shall bring the third into fire, and refine them as silver is refined, and try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I shall answer them. I shall say, this is my people, while they say, Yahuwah is my Elohim. And people will point out the wickedness of Yehudah or Judah that they call the Jews. And they will mock them and slander them and say all types of evils and perversities about them because of the secular nation of Israel. And Israel has many sins that it needs to cry out for forgiveness. There's no doubt that they need to repent before the Mashiach comes. But the scriptures tell us that that will not be the case, but that 2/3 of the Yahudim, the Jews who live in Jerusalem, shall be destroyed. They'll be annihilated. And this is nothing to rejoice concerning, but something that we should weep and moan and mourn concerning, because Yahuwah will judge his people. Judgment is coming to Jerusalem. Yahuwah will judge his own people. He will bring the nations against them. He will use the armies of the world before he destroys them in his great wrath and says enough is enough. Yahuwah will make it be known that this is his people, and he will fight for them in that day in front of every nation, tribe, and tongue. And it says in the scriptures in Zechariah 14, as we read earlier, that they, the inhabitants of Jerusalem and Yehudah, they will look upon him whom they pierced. In the Hebrew text, when it says him there, it's the two Hebrew letters, Aleph and Tau, the first and the last. Yahushua HaMashiach said in the book of Revelation, I am Aleph and Tau, the first and the last. He did not say Alpha and Omega. He was not a Greek. But he said Aleph and Tau. He is the first and the last. And he identified himself this way many times because he is the word of Yahuwah. The Aleph is the first letter. The Tau is the last letter of the Hebrew Aleph Beit or alphabet. It is this range of letters that Yahuwah used to create and frame the worlds in existence and all that we know and all that we could never perceive. Yahuwah used the Aleph Tau. He used the eternal word to do this. And so therefore, when it says in the scriptures in the Hebrew, you shall look on me, Aleph Tau, whom you have pierced, they will mourn for him as one mourns for their only son. The revelation of Messiah Yahuwshuwa, the great unfolding of his presence and of who he is, will be made known in that day. And Judah, the house of Yehudah, they will weep for him. A realization will come upon them. The blindness will be lifted. And they will see their Mashiach, their Messiah. He will have compassion upon them, just as Yehusef, who is Joseph, had compassion on his brothers who sold him into slavery. We need to understand this, to understand the great context of prophecy. Because at this time, Jerusalem and Israel has more enemies than at any time in human history. If you look on the internet, you will see all types of evils and wickedness that has been framed against the children of Israel to blame them for every evil that has ever taken place under the heavens. We see that the nations are enraged and they're ready for war. There are people who even pretend to believe in Yahuwah, who are perpetrating violence against the children of Israel, raising up a generation of those who will be ready to march to the war and to slay the Yahudim, to slay the Jews. But you better know where you stand on this subject, because Yahuwah will fight for them in that day. Yes, there are wicked Jews that live in the land. There's no doubt there's wicked people of every ethnicity on the face of the planet. There's no doubt that there is wickedness in high places. There is no doubt that there is a secular government in Israel. There is no doubt that there are gay parades, homosexual sodomite parades that are allowed to take place in the promised land. But this, my friends, is the reason that it says in the scriptures, 2/3 of them will be cut off. They'll be killed. The secular government of Israel is doomed. But the people of Israel who love Yahuwah, they will narrowly escape. But how do they narrowly escape? We read earlier in Joel chapter 2 that those who call upon the name of Yahuwah shall escape. And where will they escape to? It says that they will escape to Zion. There will be an escape in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. Who is this speaking for? This is speaking for the children of Israel in the last days who are in the promised land. If you have ears to hear and eyes to see, you need to grasp the gravity of this situation that we now are witnessing all around as the violence is being stirred up against the children of Israel, and hatred and all types of wickedness is being stirred up to bring the great wrath of YaHuWaH Almighty upon his own people. But he will step in and he will not allow it to go but so far. His will will be made known and his will be done in this great atrocity, in this great destruction that takes place. Two-thirds of the Israelites who live in the land today will be cut off from the land of the living before the Messiah, before he brings the great redemption of the house of Judah and the house of Ephraim. Before this takes place, there will be a great slaughter upon the children of Yahuwah's people. ZekarYahuw, Zechariah chapter 14, verse 2. And I shall gather all the nations, the Gentiles, to battle against Jerusalem, and the city shall be taken, the houses plundered, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into exile, but the remnant of my people shall not be cut off from the city. YaHuWaH shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations, as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in two. Remember, down below the Mount of Olives is the valley of Yehoshaphat. It says the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west. A very great valley, and half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And you shall flee to the valley of my mountain, for the valley of the mountains reaches to Atzal. And you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, sovereign of Yehudah. And YaHuWaH, my Elohim, shall come, all the Kodoshim, the set apart ones, with you. In that day it shall be, there is no light, it is dark. And it shall be one day which is known to YaHuWaH, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. And in that day it shall be that living waters flow from Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea, and half of them towards the western sea, in summer as well as in winter. And YaHuWaH shall be sovereign, he shall be the Melech over all the earth. That day there shall be one YaHuWaH, and his name one. All the land shall be changed into a desert plain, from Gibah to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. And she shall be raised up and inhabited in her place, from Benjamin's gate to the place of the first gate and the corner gate, and from the tower of Hanael to the winepress of the sovereign. They shall dwell in her, and there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall safely be inhabited. And this is the plague which YaHuWaH plagues all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall decay while they stand on their feet, and their eyes decay in their sockets, and their tongues decay in their mouths. Christian prophecy teachers try to say this will be a nuclear weapon. This will be something so much more devastating, because it will be the power of YaHuWaH himself that shall do it. And it shall be in that day that a great confusion from YaHuWaH is among them, and every one of them shall seize the hand of his neighbor, and his hand rise up against his neighbor's hand. And Yehudah shall fight at Jerusalem as well, and the wealth of all the nations around about shall be gathered together, gold and silver, garments in great quantities. So also is the plague on the horse and the mule, on the camel and the donkey, and on all the cattle that are in those camps, as this plague. And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations, the Gentiles, which come up against Jerusalem, they shall go up from year to year to bow themselves to the sovereign YaHuWaH of hosts, YaHuWaH Savuot, and to observe the festival of booths. It is very interesting. YaHuWaH says that a great confusion will come upon those nations, and he will destroy them. And it's very interesting when we look at the great historic battle that took place at Megiddo under Gideon And Gideon, what did he do? He sounded the shofars. He broke the lamps with a very small army, and he confounded the Midianites and the Amalekites. And when they heard the sound of the shofar, the sound of the great trumpet that we know will sound prophetically in the latter days, when they heard that sound, there was a great confusion that came upon them, and they began to destroy one another. And this is the same situation that we see unfolding yet again, because Yahuwah will fight for his people. Yahudah will be there. They will also fight. This will be a time of such grief and such bloodshed like the world has never seen, that Yahushua described this time as a time that if the days were not shortened, that no flesh would survive. This is how great and grievous this time is that we are coming upon in human history. You better get yourselves ready. You better be in fasting and prayer and supplication before the Most High. You better be teaching your children and your grandchildren, because you do not want to end up on the wrong side of this war. Yahuwah Elohim will fight for his people. It says in the scriptures that his feet will touch on the Mount of Olives. And again, right on the Mount of Olives, as you look down, you will see the Kidron Valley, which is the valley of Yahushaphat, the valley where Yahuwah is judge. YashaYahuw 63, verse 1. Who is this coming from Edom with garments of glowing colors? From Botzra. See, now we get a literal city, a city of Edom, which is Botzra, which is in Jordan to this very day. Who is robed in splendor, striding forward in the greatness of his strength. It is I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Why is there red on your raiment or your garments, and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? Remember, Yahushua comes, and it says that he comes and he's covered in blood because he trods down the winepress, and this is in the book of Revelation. But now we read in YashaYahuw, who is Isaiah, and he says, why is there blood on your garments, and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? This is the response of Yahushua. I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the people no one was with me. And I trod them down in my displeasure, and I trampled them in my wrath. Their blood is sprinkled upon my garments, and I have defiled all my raiment. For a day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed has come. And I looked, but there was none helping, and I was astonished that there was not one upholding. So my own arm saved for me, and my wrath upheld me, and I trod down the people in my displeasure, and made them drunk in my wrath, and brought down their strength to earth. Yahuwah speaks through the mouth of YashaYahuw, and he is prophetically telling us what the Messiah will say when he comes back to Jerusalem, and he's covered in blood. He's going to come from Botzra. So when he comes, not only does he come and destroy those nations who are gathering in the valley of Yehoshaphat, when he lands on the Mount of Olives, but then the Son of Man, the Ben Adam, Yahushua the Messiah, who was the Lamb but is now going to be the roaring Lion of Yehudah, he is going to destroy those nations, and then he goes to war against all the other nations round about him, and he goes to the city of Botzra, the Edomite city, where we today refer to this as Jordan, but it's still called Botzra. He's going to go here, and he is going to destroy people there even. And who might these people be who live in Botzra? But again, Edomites. And he is going to destroy them in his great wrath. Today, most of these people are Muslims. Most Edomites and Ishmaelites and Arabs, all these things, they are Muslims today. They are the ancient enemies of the Israelites. Yahushua will go there, and he will destroy them, and he will come back to Jerusalem, to Yerushalayim, and they will ask him, why is there blood on your garment? And he will say, because I have trodden down the winepress alone, and there was no one that helped me. Yahushua the Messiah is coming to instate the kingdom of Yahuwah. This is a war of kingdoms, a war of sovereignty, a war against two specific types of government. the government of this world who is ran by Shaitan, and the government of YaHuWaH, which is the highest law, the highest way, which is going to be upheld by the Son Yahushua when he comes, the Messiah, the anointed one of Israel. He will come and he will rule the nations with a rod of iron, as the scriptures teach us. Now let us examine the words of Yahushua in the book of Luke. In Luke chapter 21 verse 20. And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its laying waste is near. Now this already took place under the Romans after Yahushua made this statement. But other things in this series of verses have not taken place. So we know this is a future time. It says, then let those in Yehudah, which is Judah, flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her go out. And let not those who are in the fields enter her. Because these are days of vengeance, to fill all that have been written. And woe to those who are pregnant, and those who are nursing children in those days, for there shall be great distress or tribulation in the earth, and wrath upon the people, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem, which is Jerusalem, shall be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles, the Goyim, the nations, until the times of the nations are fulfilled. And there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and stars, and on the earth anxiety of nations and bewilderment, at the roaring of the sea and agitation, men fainting from fear and expectation of what is coming on the earth. For the powers of the Shamayim, the heavens, shall be shaken. And then they shall see the son of Adam, the Ben Adam, coming in a cloud with power and much esteem. And when these matters begin to take place, look up and lift up your head, because your redemption draws near. Now if we skip to verse 34, we read, and take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down by gluttony and drunkenness and worries of this life, and that day come on you suddenly. For it shall come as a snare on all those dwelling on the face of the earth. Watch then at all times and pray that you be counted worthy to escape all this about to take place, and to stand before the Ben Adam, the son of Adam or Adam. Yahushua tells us, and it's very clear, that Jerusalem will be surrounded by its enemies before the Son of Man, the Ben Adam, will appear in the Shamayim. And this is consistent with all the scriptures which we have examined in this study. It is important that we understand that this is the chronology of events, that all the nations will encircle Jerusalem. They will encircle the chosen city of Yahuwah, where he said his name will be forever. The battle of Armageddon, or the designation place of Armageddon, is not the end place of the war. The war stretches all the way down to Jerusalem and even to Batra, and it engulfs the entire world. It is so great and devastating. And when Yahushua comes, he will enforce the Torah. It is written in the scriptures that the Torah will go forth from Zion. The Torah, that is the law, the instruction of Yahuwah, which was given to Yahuwah's servant Moshe, which was upheld by all the prophets and Yahushua himself. Because Yahushua is the living Torah. He is the Torah made flesh. And he shall rule over all nations. And there will be shalom, or peace, over all the earth for 1,000 years. And Shaitan the dragon will be bound in utter darkness in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. But at the end of 1,000 years, Shaitan the dragon will be unleashed yet again. And he will go and tempt the remnant of all those nations which have multiplied over the course of that 1,000 years. He will bring them up to the greatest war. So this war that we're about to see, that we refer to as Armageddon, this is not the final world war. It is not the greatest war of all of human history. It is not the final battle of good versus evil. The final battle takes place after Yahuwah has already come back and been ruling and been reigning for 1,000 years. And then Shaitan will go forth and he will gather Gog and Magog. And we read about this in the book of Ezekiel also, but also in the book of Revelation, where we get the exact time frame that after the 1,000 years have ended, then Shaitan will go and get Gog and Magog. And they will come against Yerushalayim for the last time. And the final world war will take place 1,000 years from the time period that Yahuwah comes back to the earth. So we have to understand the gravity of this, because this is not usually taught. Most of the time people get all these wars confused, and that is because Gog and Magog, those nations, will also be at Armageddon. And a lot of what we see in the book of Ezekiel is talking about Armageddon, but yet most of it is talking about this final war that takes place 1,000 years after the time of Armageddon. So we need to understand these things. Technically, at the beginning, we talked about the word Armageddon. And we understood that that word comes from Har Megiddo, or Har Megiddo, meaning the mountain of Megiddo. And we talked about how this place is a tell today, and it's a large mound. But something that needs to be understood is that the only true mountain at Megiddo is Mount Carmel. And Mount Carmel is historically important because this represents the victory of Yahuwah's name over all idol worship. Because there was a time in Yehuda's history when they had begun to worship demons and devils. They called them Baal or Baal, and Ashtaroth or Ishtar, all types of names they gave to these things. And this worship originates from the Tower of Babel or Babylon. Remember, we talked about Armageddon triggers the destruction of Babylon. So this is important. I want you to grasp it. At Mount Carmel, there was a great showdown that took place. Yahuwah's prophet Eliyahu challenged 400 prophets of Baal or Baal and 450 prophets of Ashtaroth or Ishtar or Easter. It's important to understand that this took place. The challenge was on Mount Carmel, very simple. The Elohim, the mighty one, that would bring fire upon the sacrifice would be the true Elohim. So the worshippers of Baal gathered around their altar and they made a great sacrifice and they worshiped Baal and they cried out to him all day and all the evening. And Baal did not answer. And Eliyahu mocked them and said, maybe Baal is sleeping, maybe he's meditating, maybe he's on a journey. You need to be louder so that you can wake him up. Finally, it was time for Eliyahu, the great prophet of Yahuwah, his own name. Eliyahu means, my Elohim is Yahuwah, my mighty one is Yahuwah. And he restored the altar of Yahuwah there. And there he made a sacrifice to Yahuwah. And he called upon the name of Yahuwah. And Yahuwah sent great fire from the heavens. And it ignited the altar. And it consumed the sacrifice in front of the eyes of everyone around. And this took place at Mount Carmel. And just below Mount Carmel is the valley of Megiddo. You see, Mount Carmel represents Armageddon or Har Megiddo, because the ultimate showdown takes place not to show who is strongest in flesh and bone, but to show who the true Elohim is. You see, the world worships after demons and devils with their false religions and their false teachings. And they believe in the ancient ways of Babylon. You see, Babylon was the first new world order that was set up by Nimrod in Mesopotamia. It represents the first one world government, the first tyrannical system where man had set himself up and said that he should be worshipped as the Almighty. This is what Nimrod stated. And Nimrod was married to Semiramis, who has also been called Ashtaroth or Ishtar or Easter. She has many different names. And all the different cultures of the world worship these entities and their sun deity, who is Tammuz or Mithra. They call these mighty ones different names. The Babylonians called their mighty one Baal, but the Romans called this same entity Zeus. The Greeks called the same entity Jupiter or Jupiter. You see, all the world's religions have taken elements of the ancient Tower of Babel and they have put them together in their own religious worship. And there is not a religion on the planet that is exempt from this. The only way of YaHuWaH is found in His scriptures and through His Ruach HaKodesh, that is His set apart wind and breath. The testimony of Yahushua the Messiah will give you Ruach HaKodesh. It is important to understand these things because when the system is destroyed, it will be so that YaHuWah's name will be made known. Baal simply means Lord. Most people call YaHuWah Lord because they cover up His name with vain titles. But at this day He says that my people will know my name in that day, that it is YaHuWah. Hallelujah. So it's really important to understand why this great conflict takes place. It's not just to destroy the one world order. It's to destroy Babylon and the worship of Baal and the worship of Ashtaroth and Tammuz. It's to destroy that ancient pagan system and its economy and its political system. Another thing that's important to note here that took place at Megiddo is that at this very location, Jezebel, who was the queen during the time of Eliyahu, who was a worshiper of Baal, who had turned the Israelites away from YaHuWah, that she was cast down from her palace head first at this location, and the dogs ate her and left her head and her hands and her feet only. It's very important to understand this because Jezebel, or Isa Baal, the woman of the Lord, represents the whore of Babylon. And here at Megiddo, the whore of Babylon was destroyed and will be destroyed. One final point about this concept of Har Megiddo, of Mount Carmel, of this great showdown experience and all that takes place at Megiddo, is to point out that the greatest king in the scriptures that Yehudah ever had was YashaYahuw, which means the salvation of Yahuw, YaHuWah. And it says that his heart was after YaHuWah like no other king that had been before him. He found the Torah of YaHuWah and he studied it. He became king at 8 years old. He had devoted his entire life to serving YaHuWah, to enforcing the feast, to destroying the pillars of Baal and Ashtaroth and destroying all of their idols. And he loved YaHuWah with all of his heart, mind, and being. And he died at Megiddo. So when Yahushua comes and the nations come to Megiddo, Yahushua will be reinstating the monarchy, the kingdom. He will be taking the throne that YashaYahuw left because he was the last righteous king of YaHuWah in Yehudah. And he will pass that scepter, metaphorically speaking. On a spiritual level, this is what's taking place. That's why the nations have to be gathered there. Because when Yahushua comes, the nations have to be there so that he can reinstate and take up where YashaYahuw left off. And it's interesting that Yahushua's name is actually a play on, in a way, the same exact phrase of YaHuWah saves, or the salvation of YaHuWah. We can see a connection there. So this great king of YaHuWah perished at Megiddo, but the great king of YaHuWah, the son of YaHuWah, the anointed one who will rule and reign, he will begin his campaign by bringing the nations down from Megiddo to Jerusalem and destroying them at the valley of Yehoshaphat. It is really important for us to be in fasting and prayer, seeking YaHuWah, because the time of YaHuWah is at hand. The day of YaHuWah approaches, and the great war of YaHuWah is about to take place. The nations do not know what they mean when they say Armageddon. They're confused. But now the darkness has been lifted over your eyes, and you know the times that are at hand and the season which we are in. This time where the nations will be gathered together at war against Yerushalayim, against Jerusalem, and ultimately against the Messiah is about to happen very soon. There are many things first that must take place. I pray that your eyes will be opened, that your ears will be opened, that your heart will be open to receive the truth of Yahuwah HaMashiach. There are many who will die by the sword before this great war even takes place. There are many plagues that will come upon the earth that will kill many before this takes place. We are entering into a time of darkness, and you can feel it in your being. You know it. But because you're human, you rationalize, or you try to tell yourself that this will go away, that things will be the same as they've always been. The animals have instincts within them that before an earthquake takes place, they begin to run. Moments before it ever takes place, they have an instinct that kicks in. And I think that it is safe to say that even amongst the non-believers, the instinct is starting to kick in. But what we need to know is the scriptures teach that those who try to preserve their life in that day, they will end up losing it. So we have to walk in the presence of Yahuwah. We have to walk in Ruach HaKodesh, in the set apart wind and breath, because we are about to come upon a time in human history which there has never been like. There has never been such a time of darkness that is coming upon this earth as it is now. I pray that Yahuwah will give you direction, and that in that day you will call upon His name, and that you will escape. If you listen closely, you can hear the sound of the shofar. The armies of the heavens are preparing for war. The earth is moaning, and the sound of its birth pains are growing louder. Open your eyes to see and your ears to hear. The sovereign Yahuwah will soon rule over all the earth. YashaYahuw, Isaiah chapter 66, verse 15. For look, Yahuwah comes with fire and with His chariots, like a whirlwind, to render His displeasure with burning, and His rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by His sword Yahuwah shall judge all flesh, and the slain of Yahuwah shall be many. Those who set themselves apart and cleanse themselves at the gardens, after one in the midst, eating flesh of pigs, and the abomination and the rodent are snatched away together, declares Yahuwah. And I, because of their works and their imaginations, am coming to gather all nations and tongues. They shall come and see my esteem. Repent, for the kingdom of Yahuwah is at hand.